Most empires are remembered for the battles they won. Qing China is remembered for something more unsettling, the way it made power feel normal. In the 17th and 18th centuries, much of Asia knew war and sudden collapse. Yet in Beijing, the Qing court often seemed to stand above that turbulence. It did not merely endure disorder, it absorbed it, it shaped it. Then it turned it into authority. That was the real strength of Qing China. Its power was not only seen in armies or borders, it was felt in the quiet idea that this empire was not passing through history for a moment, but settling into it like a mountain. What makes that rise so striking is that the Qing were not born in the center of the old Chinese world. They came from the northeast frontier, from forests and cold winds, from a political culture built on discipline and readiness. They were outsiders to the Ming order, but they were never simple raiders chasing plunder. They were patient. They were organized. Before a throne can be taken, it must first be imagined and prepared for. While the Ming dynasty struggled with rebellion and exhausted finances, the Manchus were shaping a system that could move when the moment came. When Beijing fell in 1644, the event looked sudden, but history almost never changes in a single day. A capital can fall quickly. Lasting rule cannot be built that way. Many conquerors have entered famous cities and vanished soon after into resistance or confusion. The Qing proved different because they understood something few conquerors ever master. Taking a throne and keeping a throne are not the same art. Military force opened the gate. Force alone could never hold a civilization of that size. The Qing needed more than victory. They needed acceptance and routine. They needed a language of rule that people could live under. That was one of their greatest achievements. The Qing remained Manchu at the core of power. Yet they ruled through the traditions of Chinese emperorship. They kept the bureaucracy. They used the civil service examinations. They worked with scholar officials and preserved rituals that tied imperial rule to order and stability. But they did not speak in only one voice. To Han elites, they could appear as rightful emperors. To Mongols and other inner Asian peoples, they could appear as steppe sovereigns. To neighboring courts, they appeared as the fixed center of prestige. This was not confusion. It was political intelligence. Its dominance rested on more than conquest. It rested on mechanism, on the quiet machinery of rule. The banner system gave the dynasty a loyal military corps shaped by status and discipline. Beside it stood green standard troops and provincial administrators who turned imperial command into daily reality. This kind of power rarely looks dramatic from the inside. It lives in grain arriving on time, in roads remaining open, in records being kept, in legal order being enforced often enough that people begin to trust tomorrow. The Qing mastered that slower form of authority. They understood that fear can silence a region for a season. Administration can hold it for generations. That mattered because the empire they governed was immense, and it did not remain still. Under Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong, the Qing entered one of the strongest phases in their history. These emperors differed in style, yet together they shaped a dynasty that expanded and projected confidence across a huge part of Asia. Mongolia came more firmly under Qing influence. Tibet fell under stronger imperial supervision. Xinjiang was brought into the Qing sphere after long struggle against the Dzungars. These were strategic frontiers. To control them was to gain security and breathing room. To lose them was to invite danger toward the center. This is where Qing power becomes easier to understand. The dynasty did not simply hide behind old walls and pray that threats would remain distant. It moved outward when necessary. It shaped the frontier before the frontier could shape the empire. That gave Beijing strategic depth. It also turned the Qing court into an authority that mattered not only to China proper but to the wider inner Asian world. Caravan routes and alliances were affected by Qing expansion. Military calculations were affected by Qing expansion. The empire did not merely possess land, it created presence. That presence could be felt in diplomacy just as clearly as on the battlefield. Neighboring states did not approach Qing China as though it were one kingdom among many. The court in Beijing carried the confidence of a civilization state and expected others to recognize that weight. Tribute missions were not empty pageantry. They were ritual made political. A mission to the Qing court was an exchange of gifts and a performance of hierarchy. It was also a practical way of preserving stable relations with the strongest power in the region. Korea and Vietnam had their own interests and dignity, yet both had to reckon with Beijing. In that world, symbolic power was real power. Trade deepened this influence even further. Qing China stood at the center of commercial networks that reached far beyond Asia. Tea silk and porcelain moved outward in remarkable quantities. Silver moved inward from global markets. China produced what others wanted badly. That demand increased Qing influence even where Qing soldiers never marched. The empire's prestige was not built only on force or ritual. It was strengthened by abundance. Foreign merchants, including Europeans, were approaching one of the richest centers